Okay, folks, that music can only mean one thing. It's the Mark and Marty Show. Actually, BTS Live. Second episode officially. And I'm in my new studio. What do you think about that, Mark?
I think it's pretty amazing. I would love to see the behind the scenes of the behind the scenes to actually check out what you've got cooked up there.
Yeah, that'll be definitely be a future episode as far as green screen techniques and how. Now, I'm using a TriCaster, which is not an inexpensive piece of equipment, but there are free ways that you can do green screening with the proper lighting and proper technique and all that stuff. But that's for another show. But today, it's all about audio. And as you or may not know, in fact, we're doing a lot of these shows now, kind of trying different times, different days, different topics. Eventually, we're going to launch our website. We'll have stuff for you guys, like one-sheet PDF guides and things like that. But bear with us as we go through this trial period to try to kind of nail down a format and how we want to do the show. So anyway, it's all about mics and on-camera voice techniques. And really the purpose of the show is I'm behind the camera, I handle production, and Mark is the on-camera pro. He handles how you present yourself on camera. So we kind of got both sides covered. So anyways, Mark, how was your week?
My week was typically hectic, but that's a good thing. So
Yes.
It was a really good week. I had a number of things outside the business to deal with, unfortunately. But within the Mark Rogers TV world, things are humming along. It's, as you well know, the end of college football season, which means we're at a fever pitch with a number of rivalry games this weekend, and you can catch everything if you love college football, or if you just like to check out the last few weeks of the season when it really gets serious. Check me out on Mark Rogers TV. I've got a network of contributors that goes into the 50s and 60s of bringing people in, bloggers and broadcasters and writers from across the country to talk college football. So catch me on YouTube at Mark Rogers TV.
Excellent. And Mark, you've been doing that for a while. And I echo that. Mark is a walking encyclopedia when it comes to college football. He's a huge fan. And it's great. If you're into college football, I definitely recommend checking Mark out on Mark Rogers TV. Search that on YouTube. So anyways, Mark, let's talk microphones. Now, I'm not sure, again, you can tell we're making this up as we go along. And Bertie, I'm going to let you guys in afterwards. We'll take questions. We're going to go through a couple of things now. So I'm going to block that seat, but hang out. We will definitely get people on and get some questions answered. But I don't know how you want to do this, Mark, because we just kind of make this as we go along. But I do have some slides to show, and I can go through kind of how to choose a microphone. I know that's confusing, especially for Blab or any kind of online service. And then I know you're going to cover some voice diction techniques and voice techniques as far as on camera. So I don't know who wants to go first. You want me to go first? You want to go first?
Take it away on the microphones.
Oh, okay. All right. So let me go to my slides here. I magically disappear. And we're going to talk about, I know, isn't that amazing? We're going to talk about how to select a microphone, okay? And I know a lot of people, especially on Blab, and we'll make this Blab-centric, it's kind of confusing because you hear all different kind of advice. So I'm just going to kind of define some terms for you really quickly here. Basically, there's two different types of mics generally that you can use. There's one called a condenser mic. And you've probably seen this microphone before, the Blue Yeti. And that's a very popular condenser mic. And I know you've used it, Mark. And some of the advantages of the condenser microphone is that it is very sensitive. So you can kind of position it any way you want, and your voice is going to be able to be picked up quite easily. It also requires power. Generally, now this mic here that you're seeing is a USB microphone. Uses USB connections. You can see on the bottom of the mic toward the left, toward the left, the little USB mini connection, and it's plug and play. So that makes it very, very easy to operate. The downside of a condenser microphone is it's very sensitive. So it picks up every little noise. So if you don't have a studio environment, you're going to get a lot of echo, a lot of room noise. And generally, condenser microphones are not recommended for things like Blab or for people that are not in a studio. Regular radio studios use condenser microphones because they're very sensitive and they sound great when properly set up and properly used. All right. So you'll see a lot of people with these. I do not recommend this for Blab. I do not recommend this for normal online video, for normal everyday users, non-professional users in non-professional environments. But it is easy. So that's the upside. USB connection, also no mixer needed. Since it's a USB connection, you do not need a mixer. It's just plug and play. No drivers needed. Easily recognized by both Mac and PC. All right, get on to the other microphone type I recommend, which is called dynamic mic. It's the microphone I'm using here. This is a Heil PR40 high-end microphone. It's dynamic. The main difference is the dynamic microphone is not powered. It's not a powered mic. It doesn't require electricity to run, which makes it far less sensitive. The upside is that it doesn't pick up a lot of room noise. So I'm talking in a spare room in my house. It's not optimized for radio studio or anything like that. It doesn't have soundproofing. And you probably hear it sounds pretty good. It doesn't have you don't hear the room noise. You don't hear a lot of echo. The other thing on this particular microphone is it's cardioid. Well, I'm not going to get into this microphone. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to recommend the microphone that most people should get. And that is an Audio-Technica ATR 2100. There are several of these mics out there. I think Samsung has a version. Audio-Technica has a couple different versions, but this is the one you see mostly in the United States, available through Amazon and other retailers. It's very inexpensive, usually less than $50 or so, depending on the day you get it. It's been up and down in price. The really cool thing about this microphone is dynamic, rejects a lot of room noise. It's also cardioid, and there's a difference, cardioid versus omnidirectional. This is a cardioid mic here, and I'm going to demonstrate why that's important. In order to make this mic work, you have to speak directly into the microphone. It has great side rejection, meaning that it will reject the sound coming from either side. So if I go off to the side here, you probably don't hear me that well. So I'm in the back of the mic, or if I'm talking right into it, you hear me great. If I'm talking like this, you don't hear me. In fact, you can't even see me, so I'm going to put myself back on camera to demonstrate. So I'm talking directly into this microphone. If I go over here, you can't hear me that well. If I go here, you can hear me perfectly, speak right into the mic. If I go over here, you can't hear me very well. That's what's providing the nice rejection of the sound of the room. So you're not hearing the echo of the room, you're just hearing my voice. And that's really a property of dynamic microphone, meaning that it takes a lot to drive it. It's not electrically powered. And also that it's a cardioid pickup, meaning that it only picks up directly in front of you, versus a lot of microphones that are called omnidirectional mics, and it'll pick up all around. The Yeti I showed previously is a omnidirectional and a cardioid. You can switch the pattern. But what I recommend for Blab and other online video services is get a dynamic microphone, like the one here, the ATR 2100 by Audio-Technica, and also a cardioid pattern mic where you need to speak directly into the microphone. The other cool thing about this mic is it's USB plug and play, meaning that you do not need a mixer. So that's good. I'll show you the bottom of the microphone. This is what the bottom of the microphone looks like. It has, and the other cool thing about this mic is not only is it USB, and Eileen's saying she has the ATR 2100, which is a good selection. Not only is it USB, which is plug and play, no driver needed on either a PC or a Mac, but you'll notice in the middle there has the three prongs, the larger connector. That's called an XLR connector. So this microphone allows you to grow. You can grow with you. So if you did want to get a mixer and get a little fancier with your audio, you do not have to throw out this mic. You can still use this mic, hook it up to an XLR connection, hook it up to a mixer. You can have multiple inputs, so it kind of grows with you. But again, what's great for beginners is it's not intimidating. It's literally the little connector you see to the left. It's a mini USB. You can start with it, plug and play, no fuss, no muss. You can take it on the road with you. In fact, if you go to conferences and if you're a podcaster and you record a lot in noisy environments, this is a terrific mic to use because it rejects all the noise around it. And I think that's the last of my slides. So in review, for microphones, and to keep it simple, you want to look for a dynamic microphone versus a condenser. And we went through when we showed you that the microphone a lot of people have, again, is this microphone, the Blue Yeti, which I would not recommend in most cases. It's a great mic when used properly. So I do not want to say that it's a bad microphone at all, but it's great. It's better in studio environments. That's really where you want to use it. Versus, and I'm just going to show you the mic I do recommend, this Audio-Technica 2100. Not only is it half the cost of the Yeti, but it's just a better performing microphone for this purpose, for online video, for live video. And again, it's just USB. So that's kind of my rundown, Mike. And Mark. And we will take questions as we go. The way you post questions is you type /Q space and then the question, and then what will happen is it will show up on the left-hand side of the screen here, and we'll be able to take those after Mark has talked about voice diction and presenting yourself well on camera. So Mark, now that we've talked about mics and we kind of went through the differences between the various types of microphones and what I recommend, I know you're going to cover a little bit about presenting yourself on camera as far as voice technique and some diction techniques.
So, Marty, you got me started on that Yeti that you showed, and now have transitioned me to the Shure mic here. Can you, before I get started here, can you point out the aspects of what you've recommended to me in regards to,
yes,
to why this was a good selection for me?
Sure. Now, Mark has a Shure SM48 microphone. It's probably about, I've seen it anywhere from $30 to $50. It's a very inexpensive microphone. In fact, I think I have 4 of them myself because they're so darn rugged. What's great about it is it's built like a tank. And it's the same type of microphone as this Heil PR40 and the same type of microphone as the ATR 2100. It's a dynamic microphone. The good thing about the Shure versus the ATR 2100 is the Shure is a lot better build quality. So it's really good for professionals, especially for stage use. You'll see, in fact, if you watch bands play on TV or musicians play, the microphone you're going to see 99% of the time is not the mic that Mark has, but there's one step up. It's the SM58 by Shure. It looks the same as Mark, can you take off that windscreen? Just show them, because it's a very classic looking mic. It's got that ball type of, and that's a windscreen as well. Mark is using a foam windscreen on top of that. But that's a very classic looking mic. That's been around, it must have been around for 40, 50 years. It's a very old mic. If you talk to a lot of audio professionals, you tell them, I guarantee they have a few of them lying around. I have 4 of them, and they're great for taking on the road. The difference between what Mark has and what I recommended in the ATR 2100 is Mark's microphone just uses XLR. So it requires a mixer or an audio interface to operate. So, and the reason for that is the XLR cable, and I don't have one to show, but it's a 3-prong cable, and it's what's called a balanced cable. So it's great with sound. It's a very quiet cable versus USB. Sometimes you might get a little noise in there. And Mark's using what's a Focusrite Scarlett audio interface, so we can get the XLR, and then out of the interface is digital audio via USB that goes into your computer. It's a little bit more of a complicated setup, and I won't go into it here. We'll probably do that in a future show, a little bit more advanced audio. So I want to keep it simple, but that's the reason. That's the microphone Mark is using. And what I like about it is if you do want to go the extra step, either the microphone Mark's using or an 8 or a Heil PR40 that I'm using, the XLR connector is a little bit more, much more professional connection. It's much more durable than the ATR 2100. And I'll just show you on the bottom here. Let me go on the bottom here, that little USB connector. The one little caveat with that microphone is it's not very durable connection. I think it's just held in by glue. So if you're going to unplug it and plug it in multiple times, you got to be careful. That's going to be the first part to break on that microphone. But the good news is you do have an XLR connection, and that's not affected. So if the USB breaks on it, you can either buy another microphone, they're very inexpensive, or you can use the XLR into a mixer and you still have a very good microphone. So that's just one caveat. And that's the reason why Mark is using that Shure microphone, because it's much more durable. It can take a lot more punishment. In fact, you can bang that thing on the ground and it's still good. And the windscreen might get bent. And Mark's laughing.
Marty knew who he was dealing with when he recommended this mic.
but it's built like a tank, it'll last forever. And that's why I like those microphones. So anyways, that's the story on the mics. So Mark, why don't you get into some voice techniques? I know you're going to talk about some voice technique on camera and diction as far as how people should present themselves. Because God knows I do not have that. Mark is the pro in that, so I'm going to let him take it away.
Okay, so this is our third edition of Behind the Scenes. So you may want to check out previous episodes for other behind the camera and in front of the camera techniques, because this just builds on some of the other things we've talked about. So I thought that this would be a good complement to what Marty talked about regarding microphones. So your goal in terms of vocal technique is to find your natural voice. You don't want to sound like somebody else. You want to sound the best that you can possibly sound within your natural voice. So think of yourself as a finely tuned athlete. They just don't run out onto the field regardless of how talented they are and just kind of let it go and play the games. They take what God's given them and they maximize that to the nth degree. And so think of that in a similar fashion. So you don't want to sound like somebody else. You don't want to be too rehearsed. You don't want to sound unnatural. You don't want to sound like a broadcaster just to sound like a broadcaster. You want to sound very natural and comfortable, but within, again, your own comfort zone. But you want to maximize. You want to be able to have people hear you and hear you clearly. You want to sound, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, that it depends on the material we're talking about as well. So is your podcast very information-based? Is it going to be a little bit more formal, technical, or is it fun? Is it creative? Is it expressive? Is it more personality-driven, where you want to have fun and express yourself? So those are questions we talked about in the past in regards to your purpose, your mission, your goal in communicating to your audience. So we're going to stick strictly to maximizing your diction, your enunciation, your articulation. So finding your voice. I'm going to speak a little bit more to actually forming the words and speaking clearly than I am voice this particular episode. I'm sure we're going to talk about voice in the future. So I was a broadcasting major, journalism, broadcast journalism in particular. And the focus when I was going to college, and we don't want to mention those years in particular, but when I was going to college, the reporting aspect of it was very much emphasized. So we were generally hung out to dry in regards to how to present ourselves. And when you think of watching a traditional broadcaster, news anchor on television, they're a bit of a actor to a certain extent. So I wasn't receiving a whole lot of training and instruction and direction in school on that. We were directed in reporting and anchoring and how to report the news and write. And then we were just kind of thrown on the college television and radio stations to kind of fend for ourselves. And then somebody suggested to me to take an acting class. Now, I thought that was taking it way to an extreme. Why would I need an acting class? I took an acting class at Kent State University, and that taught me more than anything in regards to how to present myself and more than anything, how to use my voice and maximize what I've been given. So I don't practice these things now in terms of actively practicing them, but there's not a time that I don't do an audio or video podcast that these techniques don't come back to mind. So what's the main problem that most people have when they get on camera? They get nervous. I still get nervous. We all have to deal with nerves. There's a certain element to that that's actually productive, because it allows you to focus, and it causes you to kind of rise to the occasion if it's channeled in the right direction. So these are some of the basic things that I learned in this acting class that I've gone on to actually research a little bit more in depth. So the first thing you need to do is determine to relax. Now, that's easier said than done. Some of the things that you can do to relax is you have no idea how much tension you keep in your jaw. So you have to just consciously drop your jaw, relax, take the tension out of your jaw. Now, there are a lot of techniques involving yoga and some yoga-like techniques to take this beyond where I'm going to talk that would really release the tension. In terms of enunciation, read aloud. I know that's uncomfortable for a lot of people, but read aloud. Anything you read, anything you get your hands on, read aloud and tape yourself and listen to yourself. Most of us, the first time, and maybe the second and maybe the 50th time that we listen to ourselves recorded, we cringe. Nobody, almost nobody, likes to hear their own voice. We're not used to hearing our own voice until we actually actively listen to it. So your voice is going to improve with use, but that's your voice. So feel comfortable with your voice. It's what you have, and it can be maximized. So tape yourself. As I'm speaking right now, this may not be the best time for me rolling out of bed, because I work till like 6:30 in the morning. So I can even hear my voice. So I've got the water handy to help me out. So drink plenty of water. That's kind of a side note right there. There is nothing better for your voice than water. There's nothing worse for your voice besides strain and overuse and poor use of your voice than sugar. So just a side note there. My diet doesn't really, I haven't really prioritized my career when it comes to my diet and staying off the sugar. But water it's good for you in so many different ways. And it's also great for your vocal cords. It keeps them loose, and it keeps them built up from a nutritional standpoint as well. So enunciate. Grab a dictionary. Read through the dictionary, and don't just read each word. Don't read the definitions. Read each word. This helps with enunciation. Read through the dictionary and read the different verb tenses of each word. Abdicate, abdicating, abdicated, and continue to do that. That's a great vocal exercise. A lot of people talk from kind of the back of their mouths, and you want to be speaking with your lips and your teeth. You want to have everything out here where it's clearly spoken. So enunciation by reading the dictionary, by just flat out reading, is a good technique. Use some tongue twisters. And I hate to go through some tongue twisters right now because I don't think I'm at the top of my game, but let's see if I can remember some from this acting class. Red leather, yellow leather, red leather. Unique, New York, New York's unique. We used to go through a ton of these. Again, it brings the sound to your teeth where you can clearly enunciate. A lot of people talk kind of and use the entire mouth, but you want to speak off the top of your front teeth and your lips, if that makes any sense to you. And again, these are concepts that you can go on the internet and find out a lot more that I'm speaking to. So the tongue twisters, the reading out loud, is something that I greatly encourage you to do, and that I continue to do now. again, I think this takes us back to the first episode. You need to have a great understanding of what you're trying to communicate and what the feel and vibe of your show, what your intention is from that standpoint. So watch and listen to people that you admire. Don't mimic them. Mimic the techniques that they use, the vocal technique that they use. Don't necessarily copy them. You want this to be all natural. You want it to be yourself, and you want it to be the best of yourself. The other thing that people do when they get nervous is they carry their voice all up here, and it becomes nasally and thin. You want to drop your breath into your gut, and you want to speak from your diaphragm. So that, again, there are breathing techniques that you can look up online to help you monitor your breath. A lot of people, when they're nervous, and a lot of people who aren't used to talking, you can look up some of my video podcasts and see me talking for an hour straight. A lot of people wouldn't be able to do that because you get out of breath. And practicing some of these breathing techniques will allow you to pace your conversation, pace your speaking. It's also not a bad thing to pause. That's not the worst thing in the world. If anything, that accentuates what you have to say next. So don't be afraid of some dead air, especially when you're trying to make points. I believe that we've touched upon that in the past. Most people, they get nervous as well. And whether this is a in-person presentation, I shared in previous episodes that I've coached a few people recently in regards to in-person presentations and what they could do to be more effective. Most people speak, especially when they get nervous and it becomes unemotional to them. What engages people is our emotional engagement with the subject. And that's what brings people in, because they see that we're excited. And even if it's not the type of topic that you want to be excited about, they see our engagement and they see our emotional investment, and that causes people to be drawn in. If you're maybe in business, or you're kind of detached from the subject and you just need to give a presentation that's very unemotional and informationally based, then we tend to be monotone and it becomes very uninteresting, because we talk about everything along the same plane and we don't use any accentuation on what we have to say. We don't spike some words and de-emphasize some other words. So that's very, you want to mix it up in terms of your speech. So I'm kind of jumping all over the place. Marty and I have designed this show to start with a few bullet points and then open it up to questions and comments, and then we can respond to that. And so much of this, especially as I get into it, Marty, being technically and operationally based, I think has more of a checklist. I'm talking about more conceptual things. So a lot of what I've talked about just now, I'm tying back to some things that I've talked about in previous episodes. And I think that's going to continue to be the case because many of these things overlap. So definitely there is so much more to talk about in regards to presentation of your voice in particular.
Well, that's a good rundown. And I couldn't agree more as far as you can get so much deeper into some of these topics. Today's show really is just scratching the surface as far as microphones, and certainly what you're talking about, Mark, the voice technique. That's a whole nother part of this. And that's really our main objective doing this is, we see a lot of production talk, and that's kind of my interest, and I gravitate toward that. But I don't see a lot of people that also look at the other side of how to present yourself. You can have the best equipment in the world, but if you don't know how to use it and you don't know how to present yourself well on video, then it's not really going to be worth anything, So that's really the kind of the catch-22 there. You got to kind of put both things together. And I think, Mark, one of the things you said that really strikes a chord, and it's really simple, is practice. Yeah, you literally just got to go out there and practice. You're not going to be, rock solid good the minute you do this. I know that when myself and my wife set up our business, And we do this, we produce video, as part of our business. We do, we produce live shows and produce shows. But when we first started, and we knew we wanted to get on camera, but that's not our forte. But we knew that by doing it, we would get better, and certainly I'm very fortunate to have a friend like Mark, who is actual professional in presenting himself on camera. And he's helped me a lot and given me a lot of tips, but it takes a lot of practice. And I know, Mark, for you, who's actually done this professionally, in a news studio, in an anchor position, it's still practice, makes for better presentation. And I think that's where people get tripped up is they think it's going to be perfect the first show or the first time they get on. And it's just not, and it's just something you have to really work on very, very hard and be very consistent at it. One thing, before we get to the questions, and we're going to get to these questions on the sidebar here, but one of the things I did want to ask, and I don't see it here, was one of the things I have trouble with is the filler words, like the ums and the and this, trying to avoid that dead air. Are there, and I know there's all kinds of techniques and practice you can do, Mark, but is there any technique that you can share with people here to kind of get them started in eliminating a lot of that ums and filler words?
I'd be interested to go back about what I just presented and to see how many ums and ahs that I used. I don't think too many, but it's certainly still difficult for me to eliminate those. So when I emphasize practice, that's something that I need to practice what I preach, because I get into I think many people who approach this think, well, I don't want to be too rehearsed. I don't want to practice. Number one, because it's very awkward to practice and to read aloud and to do these things. It's like practicing in front of a mirror. I don't want to do that. That's unnatural. I just want to wing this. But there's a happy medium to merging the practice versus being yourself and being spontaneous. That can certainly be achieved. And I know that if I'm not concentrating on the information that I'm presenting and constantly keeping in the back of my mind, how can I be more clear and how can I be more concise and engaging and entertaining, then I fall into the same things that we're talking about in terms of ums and ahs. I just threw one out right there because I'm trying to think of a practice approach to eliminate those. You just have to be conscious of those and you have to watch yourself. Watching yourself and listening to yourself is going to be one of the great teachers in terms of eliminating what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
So you just become conscious of not saying and ah.
I want to echo that, Mark. I think a lot of people don't like to watch themselves or don't like to listen to themselves. Even people that do it professionally, either podcasting or produce video, I think a lot of people avoid watching the playback. But I couldn't agree with you more as far as a teaching tool. You're going to watch it by yourself anyway, so there's no reason to be embarrassed or be super critical of yourself. It's really to help yourself get better the next time and to pick out the different things or different bad habits that you want to eliminate. And I'm doing that right now. Even, I'm not a professional any stretch on camera. My forte is behind the camera. I'd much rather be off camera, running the switcher, setting up the microphones, setting up the lighting. But if you can learn how to be on camera, and even if I'm talking about production and being able to do it well and present your ideas clearly. And also, the other thing I notice also, Mark, and I'm not sure if you want to weigh in on this, is when you're face-to-face with somebody and having a normal conversation, it's much more relaxed. And it's a different style of interaction. But for some reason, on video, it's a totally different way you present yourself. For example, I have my camera up right in front of me, up a little bit, so I'm looking up. I also set up a monitor right below it so I can look like I'm looking at you guys, so I can look at myself and look at Mark and still be looking at the camera. Different techniques like that, but just presenting myself. Yeah, I have lighting here. It's not a natural setting when you're on video. So, and I guess for me, what's worked is I'm really having that conversation with one person, and the camera is that one person. So I'm not thinking about how many people might be watching a video, whether you're doing it live or whether you're on YouTube, but I'm talking about you talk to one person. I'm not sure if you've used that, Mark, in any of your training or practice, but I find that works for me, as if, you're just having that one-on-one conversation. And I think it reduces your nerves too, because you're not thinking about if there's a lot of people watching or what they might be thinking. It's more of a one-on-one conversation.
I think in many ways, Marty, that you're a better teacher on this subject than I am, since you have taken these strides very recently in the last few years and knew that you had to present on camera and had to improve your visual presentation and also your speaking presentation. A lot of the things that I came across in just the very short preparation that I did for this show, I thought, wow, yeah, I used to think about that. I used to do that. The act of sitting down in front of a camera now is as natural to me as sitting in front of a human being. So it's become that over 20 some years for me. But yeah, that's something in reading some material from some other people that they talked about. And I remember going back to those production 101 days and anchoring 101 days in college, of having that instruction that you have to visualize speaking to another human being, because that's in fact what you're doing. Even though you're speaking in the physical realm to a camera, you are speaking to an audience, and you want them to connect directly to you. So you have to get past the hardware technical aspect of what you're actually speaking to, and project yourself to another person, whether it helps to just visualize speaking to another person rather than to a large audience. Most of us can relate better to that, the in-person conversations we've had with people, rather than thinking about a large audience, because that brings with it another set of challenges and nerves.
Yeah, I get you all nervous. Before we get to the questions, I want to thank J.S. Gilbert. He's been adding tremendous amount of value in the chat, and I would recommend, for those of you on Blab, J.S. is on here quite a bit. He is a voiceover actor and artist, and knows a ton about audio. He's been doing it a long time. He's been adding tremendous value in the chat, and I want to thank him very much for not only being here, but adding that as well. Let me go to some of these questions here. Eileen asked the first question: can you recommend some acoustical foam that's affordable? Now, I can't, because I don't have any experience with acoustical foam. And that's one of the reasons why I have my setup the way it is. I use dynamic microphones because I don't have a studio setup, so it works pretty well. Acoustical foam is really, I think it may be overkill for a service like Blab or the other streaming services, unless you're going to do it professionally. I know there are several professionals on Blab quite a bit. Unless you have a studio, it's probably not worth it. Or if you're using a condenser microphone, then it can help. But it's something that I have no experience with, so I'm not sure if anybody in the chat wants to add anything to that, or if they've had any experience with acoustical foam tiles, what would be the best approach. But I just find that if you just use the proper equipment, as in a good dynamic microphone, a mixer, you can usually get away with being in a non-optimized environment. Next question: would you recommend the Audio Technica? This is from Laura Kennard, for live interviews and event. And I would 100% yes recommend that. And the reason is a couple reasons. One, it's a dynamic microphone versus a condenser, meaning that it's much less sensitive. So it's great in noisy environments. It's very directional. It's a cardioid pickup, meaning that it only picks up right in front of you, versus an omnidirectional, which a lot of microphones are, which are designed to pick up all around the microphone. So again, it's really good for noise rejection. The thing with a cardioid microphone is you have to work it directly in front of the mic. So I'm on a Heil PR40. This is a cardioid pickup. So if I go to the side, you're not going to hear me very well. If I go to the side here, you're not going to hear me very well. You'll hear me right in front, and it's designed to do that so that it rejects the room noise. And the third reason is the ATR 2100 is good, is it's a USB connection. It's a digital output. You just hook it up by USB to your computer if you're using a computer to record your podcast or a video, and it's easy. It's plug and play. There's no special drivers that are needed. In fact, you can get actually you can hook up one to your computer. If you have multiple sound inputs, you can do more. You would need a mix. The other thing is, if you want to use more than one ATR 2100, they have an XLR connector, so you could use a mixer and hook it up that way if you want to get more. But if you're doing a simple one microphone recording, it's great for that, and it's going to give you great sound quality in noisy environments. The next question from Eileen, which I think is a good one. This is for you, Mark. Are there any tips on how to reduce lip smacking? I know I'm not using a windscreen on here, so hopefully you're not hearing a lot of S's, or I probably could use a little pop filter. But I would imagine there's different techniques, Mark, to reduce the S sound or lip smack, or unless, especially if you don't have a gate on the microphone, a noise gate. So if it's always open, you're probably going to hear that. Any technique that you can share?
I can't think of any specific techniques. That's taking me back to acting class as well, when I was a junior or senior in college, because I know that we covered that. Wow. I have long since forgotten lip smacking techniques. I think it's very similar to the ums and the ahs, that you need to watch yourself and you need to be consciously eliminating those, which this may be a case where you need to take a step back before you take a couple steps forward. So if you eliminate the lip smacks and the ums and the ahs, you may be a little uncomfortable for a while, but eventually you're going to be a better speaker, and you're going to be more direct, and you're going to be more concise and clear in what you're conveying. It might be a little bit awkward at first, though. So you're going to have to watch yourself, and you're going to, I would look that up on the internet. I would look up lip smacking reduction to possibly look at that. But I think it's very similar to the ums and ahs. I think you have to watch yourself and see if you truly think that that's an issue, and then you just have to consciously eliminate that.
Yeah, I would agree, Mark. I think, especially from a microphone perspective, now I'm not using a pop filter. I know the pop filter designed for this mic is a little disc that goes over the mic, and it's held in place by a little rod. And what that does is, and that's different than a foam filter. This is not really a pop filter. This is just a foam cover to protect the mic, and it might eliminate a little bit of it, but it's not really. You'll see people use this, and Mark has one on his microphone. This is not a true pop filter. Pop filter is like a disc, and I wish I had one here. Of course I don't. But the purpose of a pop filter is if it's put a good about inch and a half away from the top of the microphone, and the idea is you speak into it and it disperses kind of your voice a little bit, and instead of going directly into it and getting that popping sound, it disperses it, and it kind of reduces the pop and the S's and things. That's the theory behind it. I find also it's just mic technique. So if I move this mic to the side and my voice is going this way, even though it's picking up here, it's still picking up fine, but sometimes doing that will help. But again, it's really a lot has to do with, I guess, mic technique more than anything, and just practice. And as we said earlier, recording yourself and actually listening back and watching yourself is a tremendous benefit as well. I'm going to go to the next question here. Now, full disclosure, Misty is I'm actually married to Misty. Misty, my wife. And she's asking, I think we went through this before, how do you eliminate the ums and the ahs? And for me, and Mark certainly jump in here, for me, it's just practice and also getting used to having some dead air. I think that's the most uncomfortable thing. I'm not sure how you feel about it, but I think for most people, they feel they always have to fill it up with something. So that's where the ums or the you knows or whatever other filler word that you're going to use, I would say record yourself and get used to just sitting there with some pausing and sitting there with some dead air until you gather your thought and then speak. And it's not as long as you might think. You know, I know, Mark, watching your videos, you do this exceedingly well, where I see you physically pause. I know what you're doing. You're physically pausing, and it doesn't look unnatural at all. But I think for most people, it's very difficult to do that.
You have to understand that that pauses can help your presentation. They can definitely help you accentuate a point, and you have to take them at your advantage. We were talking about breath control, and until you learn how to control your breathing, some people are just taking pauses for one of two reasons. Either they've run out of breath, and maybe they're running out of breath at the wrong time, or they have nothing else to say or can't think of the next thing that they want to say. Those are the two reasons you don't want to be pausing. You want to be able to be in complete control of your breath. You also want to be in control of your content so that you're pausing at the right times to accentuate a point, to separate 2 points, or to catch somebody's attention, and not just because you don't have anything on the top of your mind to say at that moment, or also because you've talked so long and just keep talking and talking and talking that you get to a point where you can't breathe anymore and you just have to stop. And maybe that's not the best place to stop. So it's something that takes practice. We covered this a few weeks ago in regards to having a firm understanding and approach to what you want to present, and not just hitting the record button and thinking that it's all going to come out okay. So be concise with what you have to say and be very poignant with what you have to say, and understand that I have these 3 points that I want to express, and separate them in your mind so that you can conclude a point, take a pause, move on to the next point, and so that your pauses aren't because they're just random based on breath control or lack thereof, or based on not knowing what to say next, but that they're strategized based on your delivery and what you're trying to communicate.
I would also say, now, I know, Mark, you're extremely good at talking without a script. I know when you do your college football videos, you'll have them planned out to some degree. You'll have kind of bullet points, but then you can kind of riff off those. And again, that's part of being a professional, and you've been doing it for a long time. And I would also add, I mean, you don't want to read it, but you also want to be prepared going into a video. So if you're presenting information in an educational setting like we're doing here, you want to have some idea of what you're going to say before you get into it. You probably want to have some bullet points. You want to have a structure or an order of what you're going to cover. I would avoid writing it all out script-wise unless you're a newsreader and using a teleprompter. But for these situations, you want to have a good outline, a good idea of what you're going to talk about. And you also really want to know your subject matter, because you will be able to talk to it, off the top of your head, and you really want to know it, and that will help. But you want to have a plan going in to know, okay, I want to cover, like for me, I was covering the different types of mics, 2 basic types of mics. I had 2 examples, so I had a list of those. I had slides, but I didn't have it all written out, but I know it, I know it ahead of time. I can talk to it, just like if I was having a casual conversation. So you definitely want to know your subject matter. You want to have a plan. There was a question here. Sorry, I joined late. Would you have a recommendation on a good starter mic? And I'm going to go back to the one I talked about earlier, the Audio-Technica ATR 2100. And I wouldn't necessarily say this was a starter mic, but it's priced like a starter mic. It's usually around the $50 level. It's extremely easy to use. It's USB connection. And it's dynamic and cardioid, meaning that you can use it in a non-optimized environment, meaning a non-studio environment. You don't need perfect radio studio with foam, a very quiet room, and it's very forgiving. But you need to talk right into it. But it's great because, and the big thing is it's USB. So you do not need a mixer. You do not need to get into fancy setup. And that's what's great about it. So I would definitely recommend the Audio-Technica ADR 2100 for that. Now we're gonna stay on. I think for we can probably go to the top of the hour. I don't want to keep Mark too long, but I'm gonna open the seat up. I know we had folks that were interested in possibly coming in to the seat. We invite anybody who wants to join us, wants to ask a question, wants to add anything. I want to thank people in the comments. JS, Anon, there's several people I see here in the comments that are adding, Knight Rider, people I know that are production folks that I respect on Blab that are adding tremendous value here in the comments. And that's really what it's all about for us. Mark and I are doing this, we love it. We come from, different parts of the production process. I'm behind the camera. Mark is in front of the camera. We like sharing what we have as far as knowledge or anything we can share. For those of you who don't know, we're both, I'm a ESPN alumni. Worked there for 18 years, left there about a year and a half ago. Worked in the content edit department, a supervisor there, oversaw edits, mainly the night shift, and it was for the studio shows, so Sports Center, Highlights, Baseball Tonight, any of the studio shows. I was one of the supervisors for that department. Mark currently works for ESPN, full disclosure. It works in network control, right, Mark? And that's the master control area. So the last line of defense, the last part of the process where the signal leaves the plant and goes to you at home. Mark is the supervisor in that group. He has associate director experience, and so do I. So we've been in TV control rooms before. We've been in studio environments, and so that's kind of our background in all this. And I'm just looking at the questions here. If there's any, and I'm trying to keep up with the comments. And forgive me, I'm looking up here. I got a monitor up here, so I'm trying to look at you guys, and so I can't read the questions because they're too small. But I'm looking on the side here. And I'm trying to see if there's any questions. Let's see. Anyone know a dynamic Omni mic? I don't know of one in particular. I wouldn't necessarily recommend an omnidirectional pattern or pickup for doing things on Blab and other online video, especially if you're one person talking. It's going to pick up too much room noise. So I would go with a cardioid, and I would go with a dynamic microphone. Let's see. I'm just trying to see if there's anything here. And if nobody wants to jump in, Mark, I think we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank everybody. Thank you. Our pleasure. Burgess, Connecticut. Burgess CT. Christopher. Chris Burgess. I know Chris Burgess. Thanks, Chris, for coming. We are happy to help. So, Mark, any last words? I'm trying to figure out when our next show will be. Maybe we'll take off Friday. Maybe we'll try a Monday. I know Monday and Fridays are the best days, and I think that's where we're zeroing in on. I'm trying to figure out if Mondays are better or Fridays are better to do this show. And in future weeks, we're going to cover more in-depth topics, and we're kind of take a micro topic and kind of tear it apart a little bit. But we'll probably be back maybe next Monday. I'm thinking, I don't know. We're still trying to figure this out, folks. So we just appreciate all the support, and we're happy to help in any way. Mark, any last words going into the Thanksgiving holiday?
Not really. I just look forward to this. I think it was a great venture, and I appreciate all the interaction from people. And anytime you have questions and comments, reach out to either one of us. We're both on Twitter. And I can't wait to tackle the next subject.
Excellent. I'm just going to go to my my graphic here, and we're going to say goodbye. Want to wish everyone. I'm just going to stop the recording shortly. Want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for being with us. And we will see you soon.